This is part 3 of my ramble documenting the differences between the 3 main Budokai Tenkaichi games. In order to get a full picture of these games, I encourage you to watch all 3 videos and experiment yourself. With that being said, here we are. The final video in this little 3-parter. With offense and defense being covered, the last, most ignored aspect of arena fighters is up. Movement!
Hell fucking yeah!
I expect that many people who aren't too into the competitive aspect of fighting games are confused now, maybe thinking like, is movement really so big that it warrants a whole part? Yes, absolutely. In order to illustrate the importance of movement, I will start with traditional fighting games. In traditional fighting games, most popular ones being Street Fighter and Tekken, or fighters if you want to stay on the DBZ route, positioning is essential. Many tactics and maneuvers exist that take advantage of specific positions in order to work. Of course, all the games described base their movement on a 2D plane, with Tekken being an exception, where the movement system is 2D, with a 3D sidestepping element to it. It is because of this sidestepping element that Tekken is known as a 3D fighter, whereas Tenkaichi, with complete freedom in each dimension, is known as an arena fighter. With that in mind, this freedom in all 3 dimensions is precisely why movement is so important. Most people playing Tenkaichi competitively, or the people taking Tenkaichi seriously, spend a long time practicing ways to position themselves optimally in a match. Every time I see someone claim to be unbeatable, then watch his clip where all he does is just dash attack into really unsafe combos, which is a pretty common occurrence by the way, I just... here in Germany, we have a word called Fremdscham, which means being ashamed of something someone else did. I think that word fits here quite well. I think I've talked enough about why movement is underrated and why it's one of the most important aspects in an arena fighter, so let's get back to the differences among Tenkaichi games. As per the last 2 videos, I'll use the PlayStation 2 control scheme. Starting off with Tenkaichi 1. As one can easily guess, this game is the most clunky out of the 3, although I do have to hand it to him. The movement it has isn't actually that bad. So of course, we all know the controls. Analog stick moves the character around, X initiates a dash, R1 and R2 fly up and down respectively, yada yada yada. Anyone who played this series before will know how this works. Instead, let me talk about a game mechanic that only few people try to master. Sliding. So, what do we even mean by sliding? Well, it can mean many things, but in the context of Tenkaichi, it means movement applied to the character while idle. In Tenkaichi 1, there are only a few ways to achieve such a slide. One of these methods is by ascending or descending while dashing. This is a maneuver called dash cancellation, and it is in fact part of Tenkaichi Basics tutorials made by the competitive community. Then, every melee attack has something I will call reach. It describes how far your character slides forward while using that attack, and this is the second sliding method. The reason why sliding is so important is because its velocity adds to regular movement velocity, greatly increasing agility without dashing or stepping. And to make that sentence less confusing, I will explain basic game behavior. Now, as everyone should know, attacking from the back increases the amount of damage each attack will do. It also gives the opponent less options to defend. Overall, half the meta of these games consists of ways to get behind the opponent. This is called flanking. Now, I'm not saying attacking from the front is useless, but usually you should always prioritize getting behind the opponent, hence the positioning is essential from before. Concerning movement specifically, you have a certain speed. This speed changes depending on your distance to the opponent. When in the step-in barrier, you move far slower than you do further away. This complicates things because the fastest way to get behind the opponent is 2 sidesteps, which leaves you wide open to any kind of attack. You can try this yourself. Once you're in the step-in barrier in front of the opponent, try to sidestep twice. Even the AI will punish you for it. Now let's throw slides into the mix. As mentioned before, slide velocity is additive, meaning if you have slide momentum and move into a direction, your speed will be the current slide momentum plus the speed of your regular movement. We can use this mechanic to gain enough speed inside of the step-in barrier to maneuver to the back of the opponent, while also giving the opponent themselves very little time to react. Here's an example of it using the dash cancellation mechanic. I know this is Tenkaichi 2, but watch this clip. I used it before in my first Tenkaichi Ramble, and I'm using it again because it is using the second sliding method to flank the opponent. And I think that is it for sliding in Tenkaichi 1. Very useful, but certainly not the last aspect. Next up, I want to talk about dashes in of themselves. After all, how could I discuss movement without mentioning the biggest aspect of it? In Tenkaichi 1, dashes work like this. Once initiated, you will dash in the specified direction for 1 second at a higher speed than regular movement. You can stop it preemptively by pressing X again. If you hold a direction with a second press, you will do a consecutive dash in the new specified direction. A smash attack can also be used while dashing. A dash smash, so to speak. In Tenkaichi 1, the dash smash redirects your dash straight to the opponent, regardless of what direction the dash was in. You cannot influence this in any way. While you're in close combat, you need to do a step before the dash initiates. And of course, that means dashing to get behind the opponent in the step-in barrier is not very effective. Unless you're on the ground. Thanks to an oversight, you can skip that pre-dash step and directly dash while you're in close combat, but this only works on the ground. This oversight works because you can dash out of a jump. Therefore, the way this works is simple. While in the step-in barrier, you just jump and immediately after initiate a dash. Now it's easy to understand why you need to be on the ground in order to do this, because you need to be able to jump in order to do this trick. After initiating a jump, there is a single frame where you haven't taken off yet, so if you do it perfectly, you can even do this trick while staying on the ground. This isn't too important in Tenkaichi 1, however. This trick has gotten many names throughout the times, most commonly referred to as the Enigma Dash or Ground at Will, although I have called it Ground Dash in the past, and I have seen the name R1X Dash used too. All of these describe the same thing though. Remember this trick because it will come up again. Next up is the Dragon Dash. Press L2 before a dash and you will do one. I'm pretty sure here everyone knows it. It's as long as you have ki and it works just as the regular dash does, with some exceptions. For one, you can do a smash while dragon dashing towards the opponent, but you cannot do one while in a directional dragon dash. For two, pressing R1 or R2 changes the height of your dragon dash, but does not stop it. Anyway, with a dash being explained, now we can continue on. From the ground, we will rise up to the air. Let's talk about flying. While in close combat, pressing R1 or R2 initiates an ascending or descending step respectively. In fact, even when in a dash, once you press descend at this distance, you will always do a descending step. Being airborne doesn't change your movement all too much, well, one difference is the no jumping part, but it also allows for dash cancellation. If you remember, in order to dash cancel, you need to ascend or descend in a dash, which isn't possible on the ground, as R1 jumps and R2 does nothing. Of course, matches will unpredictably switch between Airgame and Groundgame, but I will say that choosing one or the other can be a tactical decision. Which is funny, because the reason for it being a tactical decision is different in all three Tenkaichi games, yet it is consistent throughout the series. As for Tenkaichi 1, a big part of this game is ki blasts, so avoiding those will be the main use of movement. The ground game restricts you. The only real way to evade ki blasts is horizontal, as vertical initiates a jump which leaves you open to attacks. The air game doesn't have this issue, it's way less restrictive. One can use both air game and ground game to their advantage, so choosing whether to use each can be a strategic decision. I would now say that this is a solid movement base for the rest of the series, but everyone knows just how clunky Tenkaichi 1 feels. That being said, it does have a lot of potential, and this potential has been greatly explored in Tenkaichi 2. Some basics have been changed. The length of a dash is still the same. I think. It does feel longer, but I could be wrong. Furthermore, humming dash control has been improved. Meaning, if you press X without directional input, your dash will go towards the opponent, just like in Tenkaichi 1. However, this time around, you can influence this dash specifically with the analog stick. This also applies to the Dragon Dash variant and the Dash Smash. It will go towards the opponent, but you can slightly move around. This can be used for many things. Most commonly, it is used to evade a blast too. It can also be used to flank the opponent if done right. It's actually a small but pretty significant addition, as now, using dashes to get behind the opponent is very effective. Time for the, in my opinion, peak of this series. Enigma Dashes and Tenkaichi 2. They are still there. And this time, they're at their best. So what makes them so good? Simply put, freedom. It's almost as if Spike refined their oversight without knowing it ever existed. In Tenkaichi 1, you cannot jump after being in a jump dash, which makes sense, considering it's highly unlikely you'll ever encounter a situation where you jump, dash, and then land on a ground before the dash ends. It just doesn't happen. But remember the single frame version of this trick. As stated before, there is a single frame after a jump where you haven't yet left the ground. If you dash within that single frame, you will Enigma Dash without ever leaving the ground. Well, Tenkaichi 2 fixed it. This means, if you get the frame perfect Enigma Dash, you can immediately start another Enigma Dash, and another, and another, and another. You get the gist. As long as all your Enigma Dashes are frame perfect, you can chain infinitely many Enigma Dashes. Zero Annihilated is best known for this. Because, I mean, just watch this man move. It's as if he's in a Sonic speedrun, okay? This is occasionally called wave dashing by some, and honestly, I can understand why. Though, there is one other aspect of the Enigma Dash that has changed, and this elevates Tenkaichi 2 Enigma Dashes to one of the most useful and fun things to do in a game in general. Onto the slides. The ways to initiate a slide have been greatly improved. Stopping a Dragon Dash now carries its momentum in a slide. Letting a dash naturally run out will also keep its slight momentum after. But those two pale in comparison to what the Enigma Dash can now do. If the Enigma Dash was perfect, you're technically still on the ground. But Tenkaichi 2's jump dashes will now always be able to be dash cancelled by descending. This means you can cancel the Enigma Dash by pressing R2, which, as discussed before, gives you slight momentum. This maneuver has been called the Enigma Dash Cancel, or the R2 slide. This makes flanking very straightforward. You just have to Enigma Dash to the side, and then use the Enigma Dash Cancel and slide yourself straight to the opponent's back. There are loads of other ways to do this, but this is the one I'm most familiar with. This Enigma Dash Cancel can actually also be used defensively. While sliding, you're idle, meaning you can also guard while still having slight momentum. A guard slide. This means, on the ground, Tenkaichi 2's gameplay has ultimate freedom. Your speed can rival tool-assisted super plays, while the AI in front of you is still trying to calculate the fastest route to the nearest retirement home. Movement has gone from just dashing forwards to attack the opponent, or dashing left and right to evade blasts, to becoming a tool to completely dominate the battlefield. And wanna know the funniest part? This wasn't even the last thing concerning slides in Tenkaichi 2. The last aspect is the one topic I will never shut up about, the most underused mechanic of this entire series. Move cancels. I know. It sounds like I'm drifting away from movement and into something else, but trust me, cancels can be an insane movement tool. To begin with cancels, let's start easy. The dash smash is cancelable, and if you do cancel it, it will keep the momentum that you had. Is it useful? I'd say it helps with positioning. If the opponent anticipates your approach and tries to guard, This cancel slide gives you the opportunity to flank them and start a combo from the back. Whatever the case, it's a useful slide. But that is nowhere near all. The last cancel I'm gonna go into is the jump attack. While charging a jump attack, you won't stagger against regular attacks or key blasts. Canceling this jump attack gives you a large amount of momentum in form of a slide. This maneuver is called the Slingshot. You can very quickly leave the step-in barrier. This has often been used in the past to set up Blast 2s because you can get hit while backstepping, but you can't get hit while jump attacking. This slide is very powerful. It's easy to use and it gives you a large amount of freedom in terms of positioning. Of course, as is the case with most movement related tech, we gotta ask ourselves, is there a way to flank? And with the Slingshot, there is. In order for this to work, you need to get height from the jump. A jump attack such as this will not work for flanking. While in the air, charging the smash, you cancel it. Now, you're idle, meaning you can descend and steer yourself behind the opponent. The reason why this works is because in a jump, you can always descend no matter where you are. It does take a little practice, but I mean, come on, how cool is that? Now, I think ground game movement is covered. Next up, we'll go into the air. What changed? Well, one more exploit has been made possible, that's what's changed. This, alongside the Enigma Dash, is the basis for advanced movement in Tenkaichi 2. Holy shit, that was sick! In record time, Trunks was just behind Vegeta. But how? This maneuver is called the free will. I've also used the term air dash in the past, though that one is much less common. After the Key Blast animation, there is a short window in which you have free movement. This means you can dash. You fire a Key Blast, wait until the animation is finished, and then flank the opponent. It just so happens that, with the exception of some characters, this time frame also lines up perfectly if you press X twice, which is why you'll see me pressing X twice to free will all the time, although technically only one X press is required. Ground game versus air game in Tenkaichi 2 is a far, far bigger decision one has to make. Ground game is the most dangerous. Enigma Dashes can make the match unpredictable. Anyone could end up behind the other. You could blink and the opponent slingshot away, fire to blast 2 and wreck your ass. Air game is much safer when it comes to this, because your movement is tied to a key blast. But even then, you'll also miss a lot of options. For example, when it comes to firing blast 2s, you'll have to rely on setups. You can't just slingshot away. Let's take a detour from the layout I've established and talk about max power mode. It doesn't impact movement a whole lot, excluding one new addition. Hyperspeed movement. Hyperspeed movement is a character-specific technique in which you can freely teleport by pressing circle while holding a direction. You can also do this in a dash. Unfortunately, this makes you lose all your speed. However, it can be used to reposition and evade certain attacks. Now, let's increment the counter and move on to Tenkaichi 3. No. There's one last topic. With the addition of non-flying characters, a new way of moving came along with them. Let me preface this by saying that non-flying characters are absolute trash. In the tier list me and Tunichi have recently created, they're at the very bottom. They just have too many drawbacks. You can't stay in the air for more than 3 seconds before having to reset yourself. You can't ascend nor descend. You can't block. Practically everything is worse. However, there is an upside. There is actually some interesting tech with these non-flying characters. Maybe I'll talk about it in another video at some point, but for now, let's stay on movement. There's one new way to move around. In the air, if you press R2, instead of descending, you'll fall. And while falling, you can ascend to catch yourself in the air again. And like jumping, falling allows you to dash. This means, by descending, you can essentially do an aerial Enigma Dash. Just remember that to get out of this dash, to stop yourself from hopping up, cancel the dash by descending and then immediately ascending again. Holy shit, that was a lot to take in. Savor it, because this is the last time you'll see free wills, chain Enigma Dashes, or Slingshots ever again. With that being said, Tenkaichi 2 should be concluded. Now let's tackle the
Certified Hood Classic.
that is Tenkaichi 3. There's no easy way to explain this. The entire dashing system has been reworked.
Hey yo, what the fuck?
It used to be that when you start a dash into a specific direction, you will dash in that direction for a second or so. In Tenkaichi 3, it works like this. Once you start a dash into a specific direction, you will dash into that specific direction for as long as you're holding that directional input. In fact, if you change the directional input, your dash will also change direction. This means an Enigma Dash or a dash cancellation is no longer needed to change direction of a dash, as this can now be done by just the analog stick, reducing the movement mastery by a drastic amount. Some might say a little bit too much. Speaking of dashes, the Enigma Dash is still possible, however, the developers fixed the one frame in which you were still technically on the ground, resulting in chained Enigma Dashes being impossible, as you're in the air after one Enigma Dash. You will always only be able to do one. Changing direction with the analog stick works, but is slow in comparison to a consecutive Enigma Dash. Where it was once possible to orbit the opponent at point-blank range, the turning speed of this new dashing system is not even enough to stay in the step-in barrier. The only thing the Enigma Dash is now useful for is the perfect flank. Now, what is the perfect flank? The perfect flank is a technique in which you Enigma Dash immediately after cancel that dash and enter a slide, and use that slide to get behind the opponent. It seems to be similar to flanks seen in Tenkaichi 2, true. However, in order for this specific flank to work, the timing for the Enigma Dash is different. And you have to turn far wider for the slide to work, hence the name Perfect Flank, as there is really only one way to execute this flank, contrary to the multitude of ways to use the Enigma Dash to flank in Tenkaichi 2. Oh, and by the way, slides have changed. The speed will fade much quicker. The only other thing that has changed is the removal of move cancels, which, of course, also removed every movement technique using those move cancels, like the Slingshot. Alright, the ground game's covered, so let's go into the air. There have been two major changes. First change being, the free will exploit is fixed. You can now no longer use a key blast to dash freely. The second change is the removal of ascending and descending steps. You heard me right. Even in the step-in barrier, you can now regularly ascend or descend without that weird-looking step. This is very useful, of course, because this means you can use the ascend or descend to have a little more freedom in the air. I mean, it's not free will type of freedom, but it's still very useful. It is often used to flank the opponent while they are in an animation. As you can see, the difference movement-wise between Tenkaichi 2 and 3 is gigantic. The ways to flank or position yourself are unique to each game. If you play Tenkaichi 2 as if it were 3, or 3 as if it were 2, as I've found out, you literally hurt yourself in your confusion. Groundgame in Tenkaichi 3 is kinda bad. The game is far more reliant on commitment, so the ground game just doesn't have much to offer. The air game is where you'll spend most of your time, simply because it offers the most. It just shows how simple changes can lead to such a drastic change in gameplay. The next thing I want to talk about is the one movement change that blew the offense wide open. In both Tenkaichi 1 and 2, every time you Dragon Dash, you enter a cooldown in which you cannot start another Dragon Dash. This cooldown is now gone. That means you can literally start a Dragon Dash while in the starting animation of another Dragon Dash. This allows for a technique called the Dragon Dash Cancel. There's plenty of ways to do a Dragon Dash Cancel. I will use the most simple one as an example. Do a neutral full power smash. Right after, use Dragon Humming, but hold the analog stick in some other direction. This will change the trajectory of your dragon humming. Then, at the highest point of difference, hold up and start another dragon dash. If the timing was right, your dragon dash will go past the opponent, at which point you start yet another dragon dash, and then go right back towards him. Now, if this was done right, you've ended up behind the opponent and reset your rush, so now you can continue the combo. It is such a great pressure tool, because at no point do you stop being on the offense, yet you both flanked the opponent and continued your combo. There's plenty of other interesting stuff that this quirk allows for. For example, you can instantly start a neutral dragon dash without the animation by simply using an upward dragon dash and then immediately after dragon dash without the animation. In both Tenkaichi 1 and 2, dragon dashes were just not very useful, but here, I'm sure you can see why they are so commonly used. There's also a mechanic known as the Z burst dash, which happens when you press the dragon dash input while being in a dragon dash. It takes a lot of ki and it zooms straight to the back of the opponent. It's a good approaching tool for those who haven't yet developed this skill for the advanced movement. Lastly, let's revisit hyperspeed movement. It still stops your momentum. However, the developers have made it chainable, meaning you can use this as an approach. This makes them way more useful. It is actually possible to use hyperspeed movement to follow up throws. It's like a dragon dash cancel without the dragon dashes or the cancels. And that concludes movement differences in the Tenkaichi games. And by extension, this 3-part series. From a way to evade attacks, to a way to approach the opponent. All the way to extending combos. Movement is versatile. It's effective. It's important. In fact, I'd even go so far as to say it's the most important aspect of these games. Movement mastery can decide which players claim to be good, but in reality can only beat the CPU by spamming Dragon Thunder, and which players have truth to that claim, and actually took the time to practice and master Tenkaichi. Most of the time when someone critiques Tenkaichi gameplay, the first thing they criticize is the combos, when in reality, the movement ability and skill is the main telling factor of one's skill in Tenkaichi, and, by extension, arena fighters in general. Tenkaichi 1 was primitive, and even then, it showed that there is a level of movement mastery that can turn the entire gameplay around. Then Tenkaichi 2 built so much on the foundation that it is widely considered to be the Tenkaichi that has the highest skill ceiling. With the precision required to chain Enigma Dashes and free wilts, the game sense and knowledge to use these tools to position yourself correctly to maximize your advantage in a match, then given all the offensive and defensive options previously discussed, high-level Tenkaichi 2 play isn't common anymore, unfortunately, but I can promise you that it is a sight to behold. Tenkaichi 2 will always be my favorite, and the reason why is because of all of this. Haters would say I'm biased, but you know. Yeah, anyway, Tenkaichi 3 has toned this down by a couple 100 notches, although that's not saying much. Sure, the skill ceiling regarding movement is far lower, but that doesn't mean doing the perfect flank, DDCs, and your vortex dashes is easy. And unlike Tenkaichi 2, in Tenkaichi 3 your offensive and pressure tools are your most important skills. Movement is just a tool to apply those skills. And that's it for the Tenkaichi differences. If you've gotten so far, you are a real legend. Thank you for being interested in this series, and even more for wanting to understand the intricacies of it.